The live deal. Got
Hey,
it.
it's your show. I've never done a YouTube live, so this will be my cherry.
Well, this will be exciting for me to try to figure out how to do it correctly. So, looks like it's up and running. So, well, everyone, welcome to another episode of Young Red Angus
No,
Live.
I've never done a.
Oh yeah, see there you go. I've got to do the mute the volume there on the deal. I did
That one was me. I
it's
was
still
trying to
going.
get a
So
link.
the joy.
I was trying to get a link to share to some friends, so it started playing in my background.
Okay. I think. Okay, perfect. All right. Here we go, Brian. Welcome to another episode of Young Red Angus Live. And when I say another, the second episode of Young Red Angus Live. So on this platform, I'm adding another aspect of our Young Red Angus channel to get more people connected to more people doing cattle, regenerative agriculture, soil health principles, and everything in between. So today, I have a special guest. He's my friend. He's also the host of Ranching Reboot that you can find on Spotify, iTunes, and where else? Where else can they find you, Brian, on the podcast?
Pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you don't know where to get podcasts, probably just start with either Google, Spotify, or Apple and search for Ranching Reboot, and something will come up that will probably play on your device no matter where you put that in the search bar. Episode 95 comes out next week. Haven't missed a week except for Christmas. I take Christmas week off and do not release an episode the week of Christmas. So 51 episodes a year plus a couple bonuses, and looking forward to starting off 2023 with let's just say I've been negotiating with some new sponsors. So we're looking to launch some new sponsorships in the first part of 2023, and just having a lot of fun doing the whole podcast thing, man.
Awesome. Well, so you, the viewer at home, know we're gonna Brian and I will talk here, and then at the end of the show, we'll open it up for questions that you guys may have for Brian, and then stay tuned for the very end because I also have a promo offer for all of my viewers. So make sure you watch to the end of the show today so that you can get that promo code. So Brian, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what your operation looks like.
Well, I'm 44. I like long walks on the beach and Mexican food and sunsets.
Yes,
uh,
that's the answer I was looking for.
awesome. That's what I thought. So yeah, I guess you could call me a second generation holistic rancher. I'm in the Red Hills of Kansas, which is in the south central part of the state. I call it South Central because I'm pretty much halfway between Missouri and Nebraska, about 20 miles from Oklahoma. Doesn't get much more central or south than that. Not fighting, trying to manage through month number like 29 of the worst drought that we've ever seen, had, or even thought we could have. Grow cows and not grow.
Drought look like for you, Brian?
Pardon?
What does the drought look like where you're at?
We had I got 62 hundredths of an inch of rain at ranch headquarters last week, and we've had probably 3 rains in the last 100 days of a half inch, or right around a half inch. It's been over 100 days, probably about 120 days since we had a rain of 1 inch or more. So for perspective for y'all, normal rainfall, and keep in mind, normal is just a setting on a dryer, right? Normal rainfall or average rainfall, which you never get, is somewhere between 20 and 22 inches of rain. And we've got like 12 or less. So to say that it's dry is somewhat of an understatement, because last year was, I don't know, like 14 and a half, 15 inches of rain. That's about all we got. And then we can even kind of turn back to 2020, and there was some drought. Like late 2020 is when my drought triggered. Like that's when I went, said, okay, well, I'm no longer on the fence. The drought's coming. It's here. Like it's starting now. And I need to go ahead and start enacting drought plan steps and be proactive. So I can still graze through this thing and I don't have to panic when if it gets really bad and goes into year 2 or year 3, which is where we're at now. We're at the end of year 2 of this drought, getting ready to head to year 3. And, I'm grazing stockpiled grass, and I've got stockpiled grass until May for my cows, and I'm not worried about it. Just my problem is hauling enough protein to them so they can get their bellies full with the brown grass.
Yeah. So what has your history been like with that ranch that you're currently on?
I grew up here, and I grew up here, right? And while I was growing up here, my dad took over this ranch in like 1985, and I think I came to live with him in 88. And that was also the year that he went to Ranching for Profit the first time. So ever since I've been on the ranch or around the ranch, I've been hearing about, a lot of the core concepts they teach in Ranching for Profit, like the whole concept of nutrient cycling, water cycling, and mineral cycling. That was pretty early in my brain. The early tenets of holistic management were kind of jammed in there somehow by accidentally on purpose. So I've always kind of I kind of developed my own holistic mindset of being able to think of things in a more holistic frame of reference. I just didn't really know what to call it then. I just thought that's how everybody thought. And that's just how the world worked, because that was my frame of reference. So when he went the second time to RFP, I wasn't in the house. I joined the Navy and I was gone. And the same thing with his third trip through. But his third trip through Ranching for Profit was like that. It was kind of spurred by me saying, I want to come home and work on the ranch. So he went back to Ranching for Profit, got involved, got really heavily involved in Executive Link to try to figure out some sort of succession plan. And well, it worked because here I am.
Yeah, that's awesome that your dad had the foresight to do that. So many farming operations, they don't have that that the dad or the patriarch of the family isn't prepared to make that decision, isn't prepared to make that transition, and doesn't even really want to do it.
Well, so I can see this from a bunch of different sides, Jay. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're in your front part of your 30s, right?
No, 40.
Oh shit. Sorry, man.
No, you're good.
You look good for 40.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought you were a little bit younger. All right, so this will still make perfect sense to you. So our age group, the guys a little bit older than us, and even the guys younger than us. Well, I mean, especially the guys younger than us, but even the guys just a little bit older than us. I mean, they were told, "Don't come back to the farm. Don't come back to the farm. Don't come back to the farm." All of us that have come up post Earl Butts, post mid 70s. Okay. Everybody I've talked to through the podcast, everybody I know in real life, it's like there's kind of a fuzzy line in there where things were handed down. And that was like, that was still a viable thing. And then we get this get big or get out mentality. And all of a sudden the numbers are starting to shrink and everybody's starting to go away. Well,
yeah.
It's be probably the 5th time I've said it in the last couple of days, but have we reached peak Earl Butts? Have we reached peak big or get out?
I kind of hope so. Otherwise, you'll see the family farm shrivel up and it'll all be corporate farming, which I'd hate to see it go to. But tell us a little bit more about, you've been raised on this holistic management journey, but kind of explain to the viewers what holistic management looks like in your operation and how it transformed as your dad was doing it onto, what you've been able to do in it now currently.
Holistic management is about being able to think about and see more of the system that you're trying to manage and understand what subtle changes to inputs will drive big swings in the output. Fucker, I wasn't prepared to answer this question. Define holistic management. It's understanding that things function as part of wholes, WHOLES, right? Like we function as part of a larger whole. I guess there's kind of a gearbox analogy, right? So different things make up different gears. So maybe on a farm, you have a crop, and that represents one gear. You have chickens, and that represents another gear. You have pigs, and that represents a third gear. And then you have like a hay crop, and then another grain crop. And all these represent different gears. And as long as everything is working, there's a little bit of lubrication, these gears are properly meshed and timed at the right things, the whole machine's going to work. That's what holistic management is, but it's not, but there's slippage that's allowed in between the parts, right? It's not like it's a rigidly bound together mechanism. There can be some slippage. And holistic management is the consideration of how the entire system functions together as a whole. And I guess a simple way that we can look at that is we can just take our basic cow, because everybody, well, not everybody, you and I speak the language of cows. So let's speak the language of cows. Okay.
Sure.
We have at the simplest level, a cow eats grass. A cow turns grass into beef, right?
Yep.
30,000 foot view. Okay. So the next level of granularity, a 1,000 pound cow needs approximately 30 pounds of intake per day.
Okay.
We said the same thing. We just added a little bit. Well, unless we want to look at the system as complexity, if we wanted quantify each individual thing, we're incapable of looking at a system and its infinite complexity. So in order to understand a system, an infinitely complex natural system, there's some things that you can't necessarily take the time to measure or quantify or do anything other than just kind of make an observation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I'm really not prepared. I was just not thinking about this at all. So we're rabbit trailing around everywhere.
Well, let me ask a specific question. So when one of the things that you've been able to do on your farming operation is to maximize the size of your herd by doing rotational grazing. So why don't you explain to the listeners how you're able to increase cows or increase the numbers of the cows that you would have compared to your neighbors because you've utilized rotational grazing?
Okay, so the whole thing about just put up a couple fences, rotational graze your cows, you can double your stocking rate. Well, it works. It takes time to get there, though. Honestly, it does. And the reason it works is not because you're giving them a better diet or a higher quality diet at first. Okay. It works because you're giving plants time to rest without animal impact. Okay. That's the important part of rotational grazing. It's not for the cows, it's for the grass. Okay. And if you grow good grass, you grow good cows. And it's important to note that cows don't just eat grass. And I get that there's a lot of ranchers that think that cows don't eat weeds, that cows don't eat trees, that cows don't eat things like plum thickets and sagebrush and yucca plants. They do. They do. I can show you pictures of one of my cows, of some of my cows eating any of those things that I just listed. And I love them. They're in a special bookmark folder on my phone. So when somebody says cows won't eat that, oh, hold on a minute, sir. Yes, they will. Well, you must starve your cows. Okay, tell me that she's not in at least body condition 5. Okay, I'm not starving my cows. They know how to self-select for nutrients because they know how to work for a living. But by doing the aggressive subdivisions and stockpiling grass, because man, we could get in like the whole thing about paddock design and grazing management, how to measure and how to determine paddock size and how to determine grazing length. I mean, that's probably like 3-4 hours in itself. I haven't even bothered to write down a script for that. So if you want that one, we'll have to do some prep for that. Where was I? It's late, man. You want to do these things at 8 o'clock, and like my brain is done. I've been in the office all day, been on Zoom all day.
You're totally fine. So let's, for the people that don't rotationally graze, why is the day length of giving the grass a break so that the grass can recoup? Why? How does that happen? And why can't they just leave, so many head on so many acres for the entire summer long?
Well, I mean, you can. It depends on what your ranch to look like. If you want your ranch to look like a pool table, go ahead, leave them out there the whole time. And the analog is mowing your yard. Okay. There are years where since I've lived in this house, 11 years I've been at this address. There are years that I've had to start mowing the yard in March, and I have mowed not less than once a week into October. This year, the mower was out of the shed 4 times. So if you mow your grass, if you go out and you take your lawnmower and you put it all the way on the ground, set it as low as you can, and go mow your yard every day, you're simulating a set stock grazing. If you set your mower as high as it'll go and you mow a quarter of your yard every other day, that's more like what I'm doing. So, a farmer that's trying to grow a crop of corn, he wouldn't go out there with a swather or a chopper every 5th day and chop off that crop. Well, that's what the cows are doing. Okay. They call big blue stem grass ice cream grass. It's fantastic stuff. And if you let cows in when it's real early in June, that's all they'll eat. And they'll eat it all year and eat nothing. And like they eat it and everything else to the ground. Okay. Like you set stock of pasture long enough, it's going to get ate to the ground. You're going to lose your high succession C4 warm season grasses. Okay. You're going to lose your big blue stem. You're going to lose your Indian grass. Indian grass will not tolerate overgrazing. Big blue stem barely tolerates overgrazing. Right? You have any switchgrass. Switchgrass does not tolerate overgrazing at all. Like switchgrass barely tolerates being grazed twice in a growing season, 60 days apart. It doesn't even like that. Like switchgrass really likes 75, 80 days of rest, and then you can start to see it. If we're not letting these warm season C4 grasses complete their growth cycle, okay, and this is what's super important, more than anything else, and it's going to be more important in the future, okay? The only thing that stores carbon in the soil is living roots.
Yep.
Okay. And there's no other plant that I know of that can make root mass and sequester carbon faster than our prairie tall grasses. And for every pound of biomass that big blue stem puts above ground, it puts almost 1.5 pounds below ground. I mean, if you see 6 foot of stem on big blue stem, there's probably 8 to 9 feet of roots just that you can see, and they probably get fine enough that and go even deeper, and you can't, like, we can't tell how deep they go. They just like keep going, and they get to a point where we can no longer detect them in the field. So it's like, well, it's still here and it's still going for feet. We don't know how deep it is. But getting those grasses established is really important. And unless a pasture's been farmed up, like, if you still have, I'll call it old growth grassland that hasn't been disturbed by the plow, there's a good chance the seed bank is still there for a lot of those prairie grasses. Now, Jay, you're in Tribune. Now, I'm literally halfway between Colorado and Missouri, 20 miles from Oklahoma. Tribune is not far from as far northwest as you can be and still be in Kansas, correct?
Correct.
It's probably not very dissimilar from any one of your views than it is from any of my views. But getting down on a granularity level, it's a lot different where you are than where I am.
Yes.
But I bet you that within 5 miles of your front door, I can find big blue stem, Indian grass, and switchgrass. I've never been to Tribune.
Yep.
But I would still bet you $100 that with a short amount of time, I could find it pretty close to your front door. A lot of guys will say that even here where we're at, like, I've had somebody stand on my ranch and say, well, this is supposed to be short grass prairie. And then I've driven straight west all the way to Colorado. And periodically in the ditches, you'll see Indian grass, you'll see switchgrass, you'll see big blue stem 6-7 feet tall in places, right next to a pasture that looks like a pool table. Like, okay, if you're going to stand there in your pasture that looks like a pool table next to the highway right away that has 7 foot tall Indian grass, big blue, and switchgrass in it, and tell me that grass won't grow here, I'm probably not even going to have much of a conversation with that guy. Right?
Yeah.
So that being, there's that. And I don't know where I was going with that.
No, you're fine. It's something that I don't think often enough about, because we do rotational grazing on our cover crops, and then I have 2 quarters of grass that I put out maybe 20 replacement heifers on with 1 bolt, and then I have them out there, most of the summer, and I keep telling myself, well, this is the summer that I'm going to do rotational grazing and figure these things out. But it's always something else that comes up that I give my excuse for why I'm not doing my rotational grazing on these pastures.
Okay, so right now, you asked me about rotations. Well, during the growing season, I'm rotating fast, and speed depends on how many are in the herd, and it depends on what my management goal is. If I'm not worried about rainfall, we're going to be grazing for animal performance. I'm either grazing for animal performance or I'm grazing for forage stockpile. I mean, it's one of the two. I mean, it's either feast or famine in our business. I mean, we're either drowning in rain, fighting the mud and cussing it, or we're choking on dust and, looking for a drop. So it's either one of those scenarios, what we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, tell us, the viewers, about, like, what's your ideal cow size, and what kind of, when you're selecting your females for replacements, what are you selecting for in your area?
Well, I don't care what color she is. So that one goes out the window. I want my cows to ideally end up between 800 and 1,000, maybe a little closer to that 1,000-pound mark. That being said, I got an awesome little 10-year-old cow that weighs 550 pounds that weans a 500-pound calf. I think cow size has to come down. Like there's too many high input genetics that are just too big, that require too much feed, too much inputs, too high of energy feed. So I feel the ideal cow size is smaller. Now, that being said, your ideal cow size is not my ideal cow size.
Sure.
All things being considered, if we're talking grass ranch to grass ranch, the distances we're talking about, like cow size, shouldn't change much, but there should be some difference.
Yeah.
However, all things aren't different. I have a grass ranch. You've got a farm and some grass. So your ideal cow has to fit your context, has to fit your environment, has to fit your business, right?
Absolutely.
Like, people get caught up like, well, what's the best kind of cow? Well, 99% of people, the only kind of cow they've ever heard of is an Angus. So that's what they're going to say. And if you asked them what an Angus looked like, they'd draw you a picture of a Holstein with horns.
Yep.
So 800,000 pounds, that's less of a consideration. Like overall size is less of a consideration for me because I'm worried about what she costs to keep and what she costs to get rebred, which is really the number is, it's the same number, just a different way of looking at it. And got to call for fertility, find the ones that work in your environment. Now, that being said, we got into this trap that you can feed condition and fertility into anything because all these cheap inputs. So that led us down a road of learning to not manage the resources that we had to simply get our checkbook and our telephone and order what we needed based on quote science. And I'm saying animal science, and I'm kind of like throwing a little bit of shade on all these animal science programs that have designed and built confined animal feeding operations like hog houses and chicken barns and feedlots. So in the name of science, in the name of needles and Ivomec and antibiotics and all these fancy supplements, we've lost the art of identifying animals that can perform in their natural environment, whatever their natural environment looks like. And this comes to mind because a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, I interviewed my friend John Tipton from Tipton Beef Masters down in Texas. And it made me realize a few things. So the gentleman that came up with that, Tom Lassiter, that came up with the Beefmaster breed. So just please, I hope I don't get this wrong. Like 2,000 people listen to my podcast. I know you get way more people on your YouTube channel than that. All right. So redhillsrancher@gmail.com is my email address for all the hate mail you want to send me. I've got things. Bring it on.
They can just leave in the comments here. It helps the algorithms.
Yeah. Tag me in the comments at Red Hills Rancher. That'll work. I read those. So Beefmasters. Beefmasters were bred up from, let's see if I have this right, Herefords, milking Shorthorns, and then they're half Brahma or Naguni, whatever. I don't even want to have that language fight again. Brahma, Naguni, Nelore. I'm over that one. So they're basically half Brahma, quarter milking Shorthorn, quarter Hereford. Okay, roger that. Gotcha. So breaking that down, what did we get from the Nelore genetics, from the Bos Indicus? What do we get from that? We got heat tolerance. We got pest resistance. We got a lot of good stuff. But what we didn't get was a tremendous carcass. We didn't get a lot. We didn't get fleshing ability. We didn't get good quality. We got those from the Hereford. And what I think the Milking Shorthorn brought to the table was a hell of a lot of feed efficiency. And here's why. The Beefmaster breed standard was developed in the 1920s and 1930s. Yeah, there was corn silage, there was sweet feed, but there was precious damn little. And what little there was, it was really fucking expensive. Nobody had mixer trucks to go out and feed. There was no such thing as a scale. We didn't have computerized scales to weigh milk production. And milk production was one of Tom's things, right? Light bulb. Milk production on forage is one of the things that matters to me. Don't ask me how I plan on measuring it, but I think milk production, not volume of milk production, but percent butter fat in the milk, I think is a metric that we really need to be looking at for our grass cattle. Because if that animal can survive in a pasture with what's growing out there, with a varied diet, of all the grasses, all the forbs, which forbs are what some of y'all call weeds, okay? Like, quit calling pigweed. Let's call it Palmer amaranth. It's 24% protein. It's awesome feed, okay? Tumbleweeds, 26% crude protein. Let's quit calling them weeds. They're good cow feed, y'all.
It's funny. I did a YouTube video where a lot of the conversation I went out this summer, and more than any other summer before, I dug up more and more plant roots just to see which ones had any kind of fungus growing off of the roots. And time again, I would say like half of the pigweeds or Palmer amaranth that I pulled up would have fungus and fungal hyphae connected to the roots. And so, I was really excited. I showed my dad, and he's like, "What are we looking at?" And I'm like, "This fungal hyphae on the roots, like it's all over these pig roots." And he's like, "Or pigweed roots." And he's like, "So what?" And I said, "Dad, these plants share micronutrients with one another. And if we're seeing the fungus on the roots, then I'm positive that the pigweed is sharing micronutrients with the corn, and its taproot is deeper than the corn. So it's getting micronutrients that the corn can't get. So they're actually not, like, even though they're taking moisture, they're not a weed in the same way that you think that they've been a weed in the past, because we're fixing issues that we have in our soil. And right now it's building carbon and it's sharing micronutrients with the corn because we're healing our system." And he's like, "I don't care. I still want it dead."
And the deep taproot on the Palmer amaranth, it goes down and it breaks up compaction layers. It breaks up that hard pan that builds up in the farm fields over time because of lack of organic matter.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
There's no such thing as a weed. There's plants that grow in the conditions that we created, and some of them thrive better than others. And so GMO corn thrives in our tilled up ground because they've bred it that way. And so do pigweeds, and so do kochia. So those are things that we have to address if we're going to heal our systems and make them more functional. You brought up the water cycle at the very beginning. When did you first hear about the water cycle, and when do you feel like you really began to understand how that worked, and how you on your ranch was fixing the water cycle?
Oh, well, I mean, that one goes back pretty far. I've always had, like, water cycle and being water efficient has always been beaten into my head. Like, I wasn't allowed to take long showers as a young man because Dad was worried that the well might not hold up if we took too long of showers. So water conservation has always been on my mind. And it was probably not long after I came back from the Navy. There was a ecological site survey done on the creek that's on the east side of the ranch. And we put in some monitors, some creek flow monitors. So this creek is really cool, Jay Young. And I wish you'd, if you ever come down to my ranch, I will show you this creek. I promise you, I'll show you this creek because there's no avoiding it. It starts on the ranch south of the highway, about a half of a mile, and it runs 2.5 miles north through the ranch and flows off. And in the late 1980s, before all the cross fencing, before the water development, before the burning, I was a little kid and I had a little Honda four-wheeler. Okay.
Yep.
And pardon?
No, you're good.
Okay. So I had this little Honda four-wheeler, and there's a place that we call the sand pit. You can imagine what's there. It was a fun place to go ride. So we had a trail. You could leave the house and just go all the way through the pasture and get there. I'd like to say I remember riding through a bunch of cedar trees, but I'm probably making that up. But I do remember going through what we call middle crossing.
Okay.
And it's the only canyon that I really have to go across to get from ranch headquarters to the sand pit. And I remember going across there on this little Honda four-wheeler a couple times and it being muddy. I go down there now, and other than the main channel, which I'll talk about in just a second, the banks are still on the same level that they were 30 odd years ago, almost 35 years ago when I was riding that little four-wheeler across there.
Okay.
The difference now is the whole ranch has been like multiple different machines, multiple different passes of cutting trees. Like there was a John Myers tree saw that Dad bought in the 80s, and that machine was retired with over 4,000 hours on it. I've worn out 2 skid steers with between sawing and mulching, and I put 500 hours on a 16-ton excavator, and I put 850 hours on a 30-ton excavator. We've had local tree companies, or tree removal people come out, cut trees. We've had hand crews come out and clear out creek bottoms. Okay. We've put in the work to do the habitat restoration. And we've gotten this creek to the point, after all the years of fire and burning and brush control, mechanical and otherwise, we've finally got the creek back to the point where I feel like it could have maybe looked 150 to 200 years ago.
Wow.
Okay. And less than a mile from where this creek starts, about 6-7 years ago, we had a colony of beavers move in and get established on this creek. And that's fine. That's fine. The highway goes across the creek. That's fine. I don't have to worry about finding a crossing across this creek. Because in the last 15 years, so back in, let's just say 1990, I could go across that creek just about anywhere. Mm. Even in a couple times that I came back from the Navy, say, 2002, 2003, I'd go out ride four-wheeler, and yeah, there was a lot of places I'd cross the creek. A lot less. Well, after a private stewardship grant in 2006 to work on that creek, and then another grant or another batch of money that came through in 2008 to do some more work and do some hand cleaning. And then there was a fire, and then there was some more cleanup work, and then another fire, and then some more cleanup work. Then we have beavers back. And now when I go down to Middle Crossing, okay, there's a beaver dam just to the south, just upstream. Okay. And it's impressive, Jay. It's 4.5 feet tall above the creek banks. Now, the creek channel is eroded 3 feet down. It's about 3 feet down and it's about 5 feet wide. So in 30 years, this creek has like gone through so much of this life cycle that we've gone from it being completely choked out with trees, restored it with, mechanical efforts and fire. And now we restored it to the point where there was enough water to attract beavers to come back. And now that the beavers have come back, they've started building dams. And it's pretty cool to drive around, to take some of these country cruise laps that I have through my hills, like on public roads, like kind of country cruising. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's pretty cool to go cruising around. Well, it's not cool to go cruising around, see everybody else's creeks dry when I know mine have water in them and I know why mine have water in them. Like, are my ponds full right now? No, my ponds are not full right now, but they're not empty either, not by a long stretch. So there's that.
Even in the drought, with as dry as you've been, you still have water in those creeks for the beavers.
Dude, there is more water. Like every time I go down to this beaver colony, okay, let me be clear. There's 2 beaver colonies on this creek.
Sure.
There's the lower and the upper. The upper's been there longer. The lower only has 1 dam. And I think that if they don't do some expansion, I'm going to maybe start thinking that colony is not going to be successful and be here next year. So I'm going to be watching the lower colony, the younger one, a little bit closer than the upper one. Since they've been there, it's kind of hard to describe without pictures or actually being there, but they keep building up their main dam, and the higher up they build their main dam, the more they push water out to the west, out on this big flat that's not even a creek bank. So, and it started last year. Like it was about this time last year, actually, is when it started, when they finally got it built up enough to actually start kicking water around on the west, instead of just almost going right back into the main channel. They built it up enough to where it flowed to the west instead of going back to the main channel. And they've added 9 inches since then. They've added 9 inches to that dam. Oh, and they've gone downstream and built 2 more dams this fall. So, yeah. And then the beaver down there on the lower one that's downstream, he's added probably close to a foot on top of his dam in the last 90 days or so.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, to me, like, you can talk about healing the water cycle and you can talk about different things, but to be able to give that visual picture of being able to bring beavers back is just perfect.
Okay. So that reminds me of where I was going. You're talking about water cycle, and in this process of getting this creek cleaned out, we did a study and we put some water flow meters in, like some transducers in the creek. So they came out and they did like some really, really hyper detailed cross sections of the creek in the areas that they wanted to put these stream flow monitors in. And the idea is since we own the watershed.
Okay.
We own all of the watershed of this creek until it leaves the ranch. We know, like, if we put out if we put out some rain gauges to measure the rainfall, and the area that watershed is catching rain in. So if you have a couple of good rain gauges, the area that it's going to be in, that the rain's going to fall on. Okay. And then the cross-sectional cross-sectional area of the creek. Then from there, apparently, it's just math after that point. Okay. Because the water's going to flow at the water's going to be flowing at a certain speed based on the fall. and there's a certain volume of water going to be going through based on the depth. And like these were like hyper accurate transducers. Like they would measure like to the 100th of an inch of water depth. Okay. So the idea is we're going to be measuring moisture infiltration. This is 15 years ago. Okay. So because of those early tests, we determined that until the rain rate exceeded 6 inches per hour, we were absorbing 100% of it.
Wow. That's incredible.
I mean, okay, 100 is a stretch. 80 to 90% of it.
Like sure, but 6 inches an hour is that's a lot of rain, you know.
Yeah, I can get we got a like last big rain we had, I think was like 1.25 inches or 1.35 inches. My creek didn't even come up. Like, you know, if you got 1.35 inches of rain on a cornfield, not your cornfield, if your conventionally farmed neighbor got 1.25 inches of rain on a conventionally farmed cornfield, what happened is a cornfield? Like, I mean, let's be honest, you know, a couple 100 tons of it washes down the road.
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's a fallow period and they're just plowing their ground or sweeping their ground, getting it prepared for wheat drilling. Drew has a question for you. He wants to know what your stocking rate is currently.
I hate that question. And I hate that question because I never know what units to answer in that are going to make sense to somebody else.
Sure. Well, explain that. Like, explain why, you know, you're able to run so many more cows because of pounds per acre as opposed to like just a flat stocking rate.
Well, okay. And it's also worth mentioning that, you know, you can go just a couple miles east. I mean, 50, 80 miles east, and carrying capacity changes a lot. It goes up real fast when you go east, and it goes down when you go west. Okay, that's just the way it is. And it's, if I'm at the coffee shop or we're at a conference, it's one thing to talk about the number, right? It's something else to talk about it kind of like in an open social media setting, because somebody's always going to come on and tell you you're wrong, and they're right, because, you know, that stocking rate doesn't make sense for them. And of course it doesn't make sense for them. So I'll try to put it in as much perspective as I possibly can. NRCS, this county average is 22 acres a cow for year round, or whatever they call year round. That's the numbers they put out. Okay. This year we're at 12 acres a cow.
Wow.
So I'm double the county average. I'm going to hit May 1st, and I'm still going to have a 25% stockpile. So if I don't bring in any more cows, I can graze to mid-July without a drop of rain. I don't know if they'll be able to afford the protein to graze that long without rain, but I have the biomass, I have the forage.
Well, Drew's the one that asked a question. Brian, one last question for you. Who's been the biggest influence on your life and on your operation in ranching and then just personally?
Well, I'm going to have to say my dad, but that's not the answer you're looking for.
Tell me why your dad. Tell me how your dad's influenced your life.
Well, he's the reason I'm ranching. You know, he could have done about 53 other things with his life, but he chose not to. He chose to, you know, the path that he was put on was to be a rancher. And oh man, let's see if I can get this out without really screwing it up. I have been burdened with glorious purpose to be the steward of the acres that have been entrusted to me. I didn't get it all right, but I mean the bones are there. You get what I'm saying?
That's your mission statement?
No. And I don't have that in front of me, so don't ask me to read that.
You're fine. You're fine.
It's 9 o'clock, man. My brain's about ready to quit for the day.
You've done great, man.
But no, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a burden now. Because it's not just about raising cows anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
It can't just be about raising cows. If it was just about raising cows, I don't think my heart would be here. I was invested a lot more in the land from an ecology standpoint, from a standpoint that, I love this place and I want to be here for as long as I can. That being said, don't get me wrong. I've been shopping for land. I've been not shopping. I've been eyeballing land in, like Southeast Oklahoma. It doesn't snow. It rains. Anyway, I just feel that look, Jay, there's less than 2% of the native prairies left.
Mm.
And I have a little chunk of that. And if the best I can do is just to not screw it up, I think I'll be okay. And by just not screwing it up, is grazing cattle responsibly, doing some habitat restoration, burning a little bit of diesel fuel, killing some trees. Well, hey, I have beaver. I have lesser prairie chicken. I have kit fox. I have quail. I mean, I have all of the wildlife. It's pretty cool to see prairie chickens out on the ranch fairly regularly.
Yeah.
Not many other people could say that. It's pretty neat to see some of the wildlife that I see, because, I mean, who else gets to go look at beaver ponds whenever they want to?
Yeah.
This guy. And if I get bored looking at one set, there's another set I can go look at.
That's really cool.
So
Good.
I'm going to say we as humans, not just as European white colonials, we as humans have done this landscape, the Great Plains, a vast disservice. And that's why I feel that, that I have been burdened with purpose to steward this land for as many of my days as I can, to shape it back to a natural, healthy, productive state. That's awesome. Diverse wildlife. I think I've got it.
No, I think you're doing an amazing job. I love getting to hear you speak when we're at conferences together, and I'm looking forward to being with you at Soil Health U here in January.
I'm looking forward to it too, man. And I got to say this. So, one of my friends on Discord, he's actually not in this channel right now. He's not listening to us on Discord right now. He's in the other channel talking. He's from not far to the north of me. He was just telling me just a couple hours ago that some of his neighbors apparently discovered this YouTube channel, Young Red Angus, and they came over. He said, this guy called me one night and he's like, "Oh, it's just Young Red Angus, Johnson Soup bioreactor. Compost extract. I gotta spray it." And it sounds like this guy is like, has bought whatever you're selling, and hook, line, and sinker. He's building bioreactors. Like, he's getting ready, like, he's all jacked up about Johnson Soup bioreactors and compost extract. So it's getting out there. You're reaching an audience, I guess, is what I'm trying to reassure you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that encouragement, Brian. I want to get to the promo that I brought up earlier. So we met at the Colorado Conservational Tillage Association's conference, the High Plains No-Till Conference in Burlington, and that takes place the first Tuesday and Wednesday of every February. This particular upcoming conference in 2023 is going to be on February 7th and 8th. So for everybody watching this YouTube live, we have a special promo for you. If you use promo YR, or go first, you gotta go to the website, but go to the website, go to no-till or hype. I'm sorry.
Hold on.
You're good.
What's the website they need to go to, Jay?
That's what I'm trying to tell them right now.
Try to help you.
You're doing great, man. I'm the one who's stumbling over this. Go to highplainsnotill.com and use the promo code YRA 2023. So highplainsnotill.com. I'll put it in the show notes. But highplainsnotill.com, use promo code YRA 2023, and that promo code will get you the lowest price that you can get in the conference for, and that is $120. So I'm excited to offer that. I'm excited about this conference that we have coming up. We're going to have Jason Mock, Jim Garish will be there, Don Day Jr., and Roy is also going to speak. So it's good. We're going to have a good lineup.
I can see why you didn't invite me. I mean, with Jim Garish and Roy Foltzgraff and Don Day, there's not much I'm going to be able to add to an intelligent conversation at that point.
You know what, Brian? I would disagree with you. There's not a lot of people that can boast of bringing back beavers back to their the habitat on their native grass.
They said this when they were doing the stream survey. They said, if you build it, they will come.
That, I mean, that to me, like, what's the population down there like? Are they endangered in your area?
What, beavers?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've never been on any sort of endangered list. You know, they've always been viewed as a rodent and a pest and something to be eradicated. And you know, like, okay, they've got my creek dammed up. I can't get across it. Well, that's like been a problem for years, right? It's just been kind of a building thing. I mean, in 2006, 2007, I was getting around a lot on a four-wheeler, and yeah, I could get around across the creek. 2008, I got a side-by-side. I got an old Kubota RTV 900, which went a whopping 23 miles an hour. Like, it couldn't get out of its own way. Like, if it saw mud, it would just stop and get stuck and say, I quit. All right. We're not crossing a creek in that thing. So we learned how to go around. And, you know, since then I've upgraded different side-by-sides, you know, a different Kubota. Now I'm running a Gator. Yeah, I'm sure there's places I can get across the creek. I don't have a trail there anymore. The highway goes across the creek. And I don't like cleaning mud out of my rig. So don't worry about it.
I am.
You know, now that being said, over on the west side, it's dry now, but there's a creek on the west side that I call Frog Creek that has had beavers on it. Okay. Frog Creek's not my proudest moment. Stewart's Creek, we'll brag about Stewart Creek beavers all day. Frog Creek, I still need a few more bucks to go finish that deal up. We just didn't quite get there. But it went dry. It went dry kind of pretty close to the start of the drought. And it's had beavers on it periodically throughout the years. And they didn't die. They just went downstream on a different branch and established down there on somebody else's ranch. It's actually kind of cool because I get to drive by it every day on the way to work and look at their beaver ponds. So I don't have a way really to get around on that side of the ranch if they dam up the north end if they dam up on the north end, which they did. And so 14 years ago, I trapped some beavers. Not my finest moment. We've learned, I can admit that. But during that process, I did learn how to build and research. I did the research, and I figured out that there were people that have figured out how to build beaver resistant culverts. So those things exist. And I get that there's circumstances, that there's a lot of context that beavers don't work for. Okay. My friend comes to mind who owns a resort lake here in South Central Kansas. And it's got like some smaller feeder ponds. I get we can't have those dammed up.
Sure.
Like, we can't dam up that primary spillway and have that thing go out the emergency. That's not good for anybody.
Sure,
that's not good for anybody. So it's almost like he's a constant attractant.
Yeah.
His place is a constant attractant for beavers. And I've encouraged him to find people that will trap them out and relocate them live to somebody that does want them at least, 15 or 20 miles away, just to kind of reduce the chance that the same beaver will keep going back and causing them headaches at the same freaking place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I get that there's some people that they don't work for, but there's maybe 2 million beavers in North America now. And if we could turn the clock back to 1700 or even 1750, I mean, 600 million beaver in North America. Hey, come on, guys. Beaver is second only to mankind in their ability to alter the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Beaver are the only animal that constructs a house. Okay, well, I guess birds build nests, but those don't have roofs.
Sure.
Beavers build whole ass houses.
Yeah.
Okay. And they do it for the same reason we do, because they want a safe place to raise their young.
Yeah.
They don't have thumbs. So instead of doorknobs, they figured out how to build a P-trap and then flood the door so they have an airtight living space and underwater entrance that a bear can't get into.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, it's funny. I did not envision talking that much about beavers. Oh, I did have a question I didn't ask that I wanted to ask you. Fertility. Yeah.
You did my podcast with me. I don't know why you thought this would follow a script.
Fair enough. When you talk fertility, how long do you have your bulls out before you pull them?
46 days.
Nice.
Year.
Yep. I love it when somebody talks about fertility and they actually back it up by having a short calving window.
Yeah, well, I haven't preg checked either, so we'll see what happens.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens. I've got some older cows that are definitely going to need to be finding a job next spring.
Sure. Brian, do you mind staying with me for the after hours show for just the two of us?
Brother, I've been here all day. Like 5 more minutes is not going to kill me. Let's do it.
Sounds good. Well, guys, thanks for watching this episode of Young Red Angus Live. Like we said, catch Brian's podcast, Ranching Reboot, and you can get that on Spotify, iTunes. Where else, Brian?
Spotify, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Castbox, Fountain. Jeez, I don't know. It's listed everywhere.
And you can follow him on Facebook. And
yeah, that too.
Every Wednesday night you do, what is this called that you do?
So I have a Discord server, and every Wednesday night I've been trying to get on and hang out with my podcast fans and Red Hills Rancher fans. And eventually I kind of want to start bringing in some more of the regenerative agriculture community onto the server. We're having great discussions every day about, you name it. And if you don't know what Discord is, it's a place where you can have like text thread discussions, post pictures, post videos. We can do screen share. I'm sharing my screen here from whatever app we're using. I'm sharing it to Discord. So my guys on Discord can watch and hear what we're doing here. So sometimes I do. Sometimes I've recorded podcasts on Discord and had guys sit in on recording podcasts. So I do that too on my Discord from time to time.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks again for being on the show, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Next week, we'll have Ryan